What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astro DFS bringing you another video. We are back. I am so excited that the football season is back. I've been waiting for this moment for so long, and want to kick it off with the Thursday night showdown. Both Draftkings and Fanduel has a crazy prize pool right now for just the Thursday night showdown. That's not to go off the Sunday main slate. So yeah, they're throwing off $1 million to first place on DraftKings, and on FanDuel. Guess what? It's $1 million to first as well. So basically, what I'm gonna do is just go over my thoughts on the way that I look at these showdowns. There's a lot more people that go in depth of the winnings of what positions have won in lineups. I don't try to focus that. I just try to go on game to game. Who looks good to me, how the defenses look, and all that. So I know a lot of people are happy to go on FanDuel rather than DraftKings because DraftKings does have defenses. FanDuel does not. FanDuel doesn't have defenses, and you only get 5 positions. DraftKings, you have 6. And that's where defenses come into play because defenses are typically cheap, and you start off with 10 points already. So some people like to go defenses. We've had lineups where defenses actually won people quite a bit of money. And there's pros and cons to both sides, but I typically try to stay away from defenses unless I know both offenses are low production. So we'll go over it. What I want to say that is difficult about this showdown is the prices. Basically, when you have showdowns, you have a couple players that stand out talent-wise, and they're usually expensive. You have guys that don't really have that crazy floor, which is what you want, but they have a potential for a incredible ceiling. In this game, though, there's so much talent from both sides. You basically have to pick and choose. This doesn't typically happen with showdowns, but with this showdown, it is. So we'll go over DraftKings first, and we'll switch it over to FanDuel after. So basically in DraftKings, the way that I see it, you have Tom Brady and Dak Prescott as your 2 quarterbacks, the 2 most expensive players on here. We'll put it in the flex so it doesn't have that price. Tom Brady is 11.2. Dak is 10.4. If you're going quarterback for this, Tom Brady, yes, we know, one of the best quarterbacks ever to play. Fantasy point-wise, though, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but when you're comparing Dak Prescott and Tom Brady, the numbers, Dak has more of a ceiling. People like to go for running. Yes, Dak can run. That's also how he got hurt last season. But with how Dallas's defense is, Dak had to throw a lot, and he did it efficiently. So if you're going quarterbacks, I honestly suggest going Dak. It's cheaper than Brady, for one, which is good. 2, that ceiling is a lot higher. Tom Brady has to do a lot to kind of pass what Dak had. One of the stats I like to throw out, if you look at Dak's season last year, granted, you look at all the games, they're the highest scoring games of the season, but Dak did what Dak had to do. He threw 39 times against the Rams. And this is week 1. I know a lot of people like to go off week 1 and say, oh, well, this is what they did. But you look at, and that's Jared Goff's Rams. You look at Matt Ryan's Atlanta. You look at Russell Wilson's Seattle. Baker Mayfield's Cleveland. You even look at the Giants. Dak got hurt. I'm pretty sure it was before halftime. I could be wrong, but he still put up 14.4 DraftKings fantasy points. But those numbers, crazy, right? You're going to play against Tom Brady's Buccaneers. They're going to put up points. It's going to happen. They have the same team that they did last year. They have help. But Dak has that ceiling. So you go, like, if I were to tell you to take a quarterback, it'd be Dak. Then you go at running backs. Ezekiel Elliott, most expensive running back on here, 9.6, and rightfully so. A lot of people always like to go, oh, look at Zeke's numbers, look at it. One, their offensive line was hurt last year. Now, granted, they are down Zach Martin, which is a huge, huge blow. Huge blow. I understand that. And they have Vita Vea that's in the front. But what I like about Zeke is he can catch the football. You look at his numbers until that Giants game, but you look at his numbers, 4 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets, 8 targets. That is a lot of targets for a running back. Look at his receiving yards. Now, his player prop is 21.5 receiving yards. These are his numbers with Dak. These are his numbers without Dak. There's a huge difference. So Dak being there, you have someone like Vita Vea, who is very good run stopper. You look at Zeke's rushing numbers, never broke 100. You look at his fantasy points, one game, less than 20. That's it. And that's because he has 34 rushing yards. But he gets those fantasy points with Dak. They're going to need to pass the ball with Vita Vea. That box is probably one of the best boxes in football with Devin White, Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, all of them. They have... It's going to be hard to run on the Buccaneers this year, let's say that. Their weakness comes in the secondary. Now, they did, I think, just one change in the secondary, if I'm not mistaken. But for the most part, they had that secondary, and you go, man, Tampa Bay's secondary shut down Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes still threw for 275 yards. And if you remember that game, Patrick Mahomes was under pressure every play because his tackles were gone. Dak has his offensive line minus Zach Martin. And if you do remember also, Patrick Mahomes probably could have threw for well over 400 yards. There were so many drop passes. There was drop touchdowns, okay? Patrick Mahomes easily could have threw for 400 yards. Kansas City easily could have put up 21 plus points. There was a lot of problems, a lot of injuries, a lot of nervousness. I don't know what it was. You're not going to get that with Dallas. So you get someone like Zeke, 9.6. You go, the struggle that I have finding is Leonard Fournette. Is up there in price at 7,000. Ronald Jones is 5,000. Here's the thing. If you're going to go a Tampa Bay running back, you go Ronald Jones. Clearly, he was their guy last year. Leonard Fournette, though, in the playoffs was crazy. They used him a lot. But if you remember in the regular season, Ronald Jones was their guy. I think they've made it pretty clear that they still rely on him. The one thing that's going to play a factor with Tampa Bay running backs is you're going to look for Bernard here. And the reason he plays a factor is he's a really good receiving back. That's what he was supposed to be in Cincinnati. He was somewhat used. He had a couple good games in Cincinnati, too, when Mixon was out. Pretty good games. So he has that potential, but he is going to be their third down back, receiving back. He is a little banged up, so you got to watch that news. He's super cheap, though, if he is in play. 2,000 can definitely help you with your team. But Zeke is, for me, is a must-have. So right now, I were to put this in. I put someone like Zeke in, put Dak in, just to save a little money. It's not that much difference. And now here comes the fun part. You have to choose with wide receivers. And the more difficult part. You have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, 600-point difference. The difference between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Mike Evans is basically their red zone guy. So if they're in the red zone, they're going to pass. Look for Mike Evans to get it. Mike Evans is also very efficient down the field, as is Chris Godwin. But you look at Chris Godwin's numbers, and he probably has a bigger ceiling than Mike Evans. Not saying that Mike Evans can't put up some of the big point games like we see, but Mike Evans is going to get those red zone targets. Godwin is going to get the downfield passing. There's a 600 price difference, so it's basically pick and choose. Who do you think is going to score more, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin? No, there could be as much factors that play into it. The only factor right now that plays into it is Chris Godwin was not 100% in practice, so you lean towards Mike Evans then. I'm not saying to, but if you were to, he is more expensive. You can save $600 for Godwin, and there's a good chance Godwin puts up 15 plus fantasy points. I expect this to be a very high-scoring game from both sides. Dallas's box, their defensive line, their linebackers are very good, especially with getting Parsons there. That helps it out. But their defensive backs need help. That's going to be the story of this game, is how good the secondary plays. So I expect Tampa Bay, Tom Brady, to sling the ball. They could easily put up 35 points. Dallas can also put up 35 points. I do think Tampa Bay is still going to win this game, but I do think Dallas can throw for a lot. And then next is picking between Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, and there's only a $200 price difference. Now, one thing that I do want to put into perspective, I look at weeks 1 through 5. Those are the weeks to look at because those are the weeks with Dak. And you look at Amari Cooper's numbers, 14 targets, 9 targets, 12 targets, 16 targets, and only 4 targets against Giants. And his fantasy points, he had a 36.4 and some just under 20-point games. Only had the 1 touchdown. So that's pretty good for a guy that only got 1 touchdown with Dak. The thing that's a little worrisome, though, you look at CeeDee Lamb. You look at his numbers with Dak. 6, 9, 7, 7, 11. A little less targets. But you look at his catches, 8 out of 11, 5 out of 7, 5 out of 7, 6 out of 9, 5 out of 6. Look at his yards. Pretty up there. He got 2 touchdowns in one of the weeks. And he averaged just a little bit more. In my opinion, I'm going to lean towards Cooper. He got targeted more. He got 1 touchdown. He has that potential to get those touchdowns this year. He looks very good in the offseason. If you watch Hard Knocks, anything like that, Amari Cooper looks really good. You're only paying $200 more. But yet again, it's a toss-up, guys. So it's not like the numbers are that much difference between the two. You're pretty much flipping a coin. That's what it is. That's what's going to determine who wins this $1 million or not. Leonard Fournette, for me, is just too much money at $7,000. If Bernard's in, I'm probably going to stay away from all Tampa Bay running backs and not even consider him. But there is that option. Michael Gallup, you look at his numbers 1 through 5. Yet again, his targets aren't there, but he's looked really good in the offseason as well. You've seen one game, 6 for 9, 138 and a touchdown. But you look at his other games, and he's pretty much that third option, which is a little worrisome, but he always has that potential. Like, he has that potential to have that game, which is a little bit scary. And if you were to go to him off of Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, let's say Cooper puts up 22 fantasy points, CeeDee Lamb, let's say, puts up 20, and then you get Michael Gallup that puts up 15, you're paying $2,000 less, and you can maybe open up and get like a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin as well to help your team. That's pretty good. But you need him to put up that point. So you can't have him have the 5-point game, 9-point game. He's got to get pretty close in order for that $6,200 to pay up. Now, to go for the cheaper options, these are the guys that you're going to have to get in your lineup. Now, I'm not saying anyone in particular, but you're probably going to have one of these guys in your lineup. Antonio Brown's $5,600. If you want to get off Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown is your guy to get. Now, Bruce Arians just said the other day that Antonio Brown looks like he did 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know what that really means. Are we going to see the best wide receiver in football back? But here's the thing. They have one of the best wide receiver cores in football. You're actually seeing 2 of the best wide receiver cores in football play each other. A lot of points are going to go both ways. Like I said, it's pretty much a flip of a coin of what's going to happen. But if you can't get Mike Evans and Chris Godwin for some reason, you have to get Antonio Brown in your lineup. He's $5,600, way cheaper than the other 2, and puts up fantasy points. So you have to have a Tampa Bay receiver in your lineup. You have to have a Dallas receiver in your lineup. I can't see any way to where the receiving core isn't the reason you win that $1 million. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but man, like, just the potential here is crazy. Gronk, just $200 cheaper than Antonio Brown. Gronk did have a good end of the season. It seemed like they were trying to transition him into the offense. Really good pass blocker, run blocker. But he's pretty much a hit or miss guy right now in Tampa Bay. It's hard to judge. And the postseason was a different story. He played phenomenal, but you can't judge playoffs and regular season. Those are 2 different beasts. So I'd probably still go Antonio Brown for $200 more. I mean, if somehow you only have $5,400 left, sure, go Gronk. I'm not saying it's bad, but he's probably going to be the 3rd or 4th option in that offense. Another difficult thing, if you're looking for Dallas tight end, you have Schultz and Jarwin. Jarwin went down with that injury. First game, it was terrible. You're like, oh man, Schultz. See how he does? Schultz stepped up. Schultz did what he needed to do in the small time that he had Dak Prescott. But it seems like Jarwin is going to be their tight end 1. I can easily see them kind of splitting it, though, and going 50-50 with these tight ends because Schultz did do what he was supposed to do. He was Blake Jarwin last year, basically. But it has come out that Jarwin is going to be their tight end 1. But like I said, you could easily see Schultz come in. Tony Pollard with Zeke running and running routes as much as he does. Tony Pollard gets in quite a bit, and we've seen a crazy good game from him. And this is him as a backup. I believe he came in, took over for Zeke because he had a rough game against San Francisco and balled out. Now, you look at his numbers. He only comes in for the most part if Zeke is tired. I mean, that's it. He does get in quite a bit. You look at his attempts, like, he does get in. But I worry about that week 1 through 5. The Dak weeks. 2 rushing attempts, 0, 3, and then 6 the game that Dak got out. It worries me a little bit. That's all it does. It worries me looking at the Dak numbers. I'm probably going to stay away from him just because of the price. I'd rather go a kicker. A kicker, like, you look at their numbers, they're probably going to get you somewhere around 10 points. With it being a high-scoring game, my prediction, high-scoring game. These kickers probably aren't going to get you as much as you'd like, but they're still going to give you around that 10 fantasy points. And I'm going to lean towards Greg Zuerlein for the most part. Tampa Bay has a very efficient red zone offense, so I lean towards Zuerlein of getting you field goals. Now for defenses, I passed the Buccaneers. Buccaneers is 4,800. Like I said, they do have a really good defense. I think they were the 8th best defense last season. But I like Dallas's offense. This is 2 top 5 offenses playing against each other. I can't really see Dallas getting shut out. We saw who they played last season, and they scored a lot. So I'm going to stay away from both defenses. Like I said, you got to look for Giovanni Bernard. He's probably a guy that might be in quite a few lineups tomorrow just because he's going to get those targets and receptions if he is healthy playing. And he's only $2,000, so you're going to save it. The only other person that I'd go, like, there's not a lot of, you're not going to find much of anything down here at all. The only other player that I'd consider putting in is Scotty Miller. That's it. We saw what Scotty Miller can do with his speed. Especially in the playoffs. He's 1,600. If you have no money left, if you get a great lineup, let's just say, let's plug some people in. Antonio Brown. Let's put Amari Cooper. We have 2,600. We're like, oh man, who do you put in? Brady, Howard? No. Bernard. Scotty Miller, 1,600, the one-off, probably going to have lower ownership. He is going to have, I think, a small portion of ownership because if he gets you 10-plus fantasy points, which he did in a few games, or they just use him one burner, he gets a touchdown, reception, yards, say a 20-yard touchdown. That's 10 fantasy points basically right there. And being 1,600, that can make you afford Amari Cooper, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Dak Prescott, and Ezekiel Elliott. So look for those numbers. I'm really excited, guys. I'll switch over to Fanduel. Fanduel is a lot easier with pricing. So, for instance, go look at the prices. $500 difference. Put them in. Zeke right there. These guys, pretty close. Fanduel, I like their prices a whole lot more than I do Draftkings. And especially with the injuries. So let's put Antonio Brown in. We got $10.75 per player. Godwin, 9,000. We'll take Antonio Brown out. We'll put Greg Zuerlein in. Leaves us 10,000. Just something like that. There's a lot more options that you could do, but you want to go with the guys that are probably going to get more fantasy points. With that pricing, I think Greg Zuerlein's a perfect guy to go a one off of. It's going to get you those points, like I said. But basically, guys, it just comes down to a coin flip this week. You're either going to pick Godwin, you're going to pick Evans, you're going to pick Cooper, you're going to pick Lamb. You almost want one of those guys because they're going to get you those fantasy points. If not, like I said, you better hope that you're paying down for one of those guys, the Antonio Brown, Michael Gallup, and those guys getting pretty close to the other two receivers. So, anyway, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. The link for the Discord for us will be in the description down below if you guys are interested. You can follow us on Twitter at Astrodfs. We post on Reddit every video we make, so that'll be on there. So if you guys head to the DFS Sports Reddit, we'll be posting there as well. And yeah, guys, I'm just so excited for the football season to be back. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next video.